What's going on, guys? Doomake here, and welcome back to another episode of Watching the Meta, the weekly series where we take a look at the Magic Online results, paper results when those are available to us, and let me tell you, they will definitely be available to us this week. And we take a look and see what the heck everybody's doing. We look at Modern, we look at Pioneer, and a little bit of Standard as well. And then we always make sure to throw some spicy deck lists in there just in case you are ever so daring to try them out yourself at home. Again, before we get started, if you're new to the series, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really would help out the analytics. Click the like button and comment in the comment section down below. What was your favorite deck list of today's video? Now, with all of that said, let us go ahead and take a look at this first fancy graph that we have for you, which features Modern. So Modern, there were 6 challenges. I feel like that number is down from previous episodes. I couldn't find any more challenge data on mtgo.com. I don't know if there was maybe a challenge that didn't get posted. I thought there were 7, but I only found 6. Now, I will say they were won by 6 different decks. You see here, Affinity, Boros, Birdscale, Eldrazi, Prowess, and Blink. So if you're playing Modern, you would probably expect to play some number of these decks. These are some of the more popular ones. And speaking of popular ones, Boros Energy still the king of the room at 24.5%, down noticeably from last week's 31.3, so about a 7% decrease, which is pretty noticeable. And you'll have to ask yourself, well, where are those numbers going to, right? If less people are playing Boros, what are they playing more of? Slight uptick in Is It Prowess from 6.7 to 9.4, and then from there, slight uptick in Affinity. Last week, 2.7. This week, 4.7. A little bit of an uptick in Brood-scale. But, I mean, small uptick, like 1.5% in Gruul Eldrazi. But for the most part, it's not like one past Boros Energy. It's not like there's one clear second best deck in the format. I think we can probably all agree that Boros is hands down the best deck. But it's really, people aren't necessarily 100% sure what that natural foil to Boros Energy will be. But plenty of people have tried. Like I said last week, I think this is still a good time to be playing Mono Blue Belcher, or perhaps even the Red Belcher lists that were popping up last week that I showcased, so go check out last week's video if you missed that. But in any case, this is what Modern looks like. Probably what it's going to look like for the foreseeable future. I don't really see anything truly overtaking Boros, but let's see if we can find some interesting spice. Maybe not to be good against Boros, but maybe to be good against the rest of the other stuff. And first up, I have for you from Magical710 in 19th place. This is It Phoenix? Now, I think there was a list. I don't know if I ever got to feature this one on Meta because we don't do the league results, but I saw a list a couple of weeks ago that was Is It Phoenix with Cori-steel Cutter. I think it was Faithless Looting, Cori-steel Cutter, Mishra's Bauble, Preordained, Manamorphose, things like that. Dragon's Rage Channeler, Tamil Phoenix. This list is not playing any Cori-steel Cutters, which does surprise me a little bit. But instead of Cutter, you have the kind of the 8-pack of Demolich and Arclight Phoenix, so you have 8 essentially threats that come out of the graveyard. Tamiyo's, just because Tamiyo's a really good card and pairs well with cantrips. A bunch of cantrips, Consider, Thought Scour, stuff like that, Preordained, Faithless Looting. And then a couple of kill spells, Manamorphose, and the one card that I want to highlight here is 2 copies of Winter Night Stories. This is a Tarkir Dragonstorm card. It's draw 3, discard 2, or a creature card. So good way to put Phoenix into the graveyard. If you have 2 Phoenixes, you can discard 2, so make sure you keep that in mind. You would just say decline to discard the creature, and then click on the 2 Phoenixes, and it should let you do that. So keep that in mind when you're playing Stories, but a pretty good card. And what I like about Stories is that Demolich has 4 power. So if you're trying to harmonize the Winter Night Stories on a turn that you play Demolich for free, presumably, then you can very easily harmonize the Stories from the graveyard using the Demolich. That'll flip Tamiyo and kind of pop off from there. So it's a good mix of cheap threats that recur from the graveyard, decent amount of other pressure with Tamiyo, and then just a whole bunch of removal spells. So good looking list. Again, not sure if I favor this over the Cutter ones, but definitely a decent list nonetheless. Next up, we have Ameno in 32nd place, and this one is a little interesting. So we have sort of the Eldrazi core of Devourer of Destiny, Null Drifter. Sometimes you see in those Gruul lists that are splashing blue, paired with the 8-pack of Soul Lands with 4 Eldrazi Temple and 4 Ugin's Labyrinth. Now, a lot of times you see other ramp with like Talisman of Impulse, Utopia Sprawl, Malevolent Rumble. We are foregoing all of that. No green cards here. We're not going to be eating our vegetables today. Well, we do still have Talisman, so I guess that kind of counts as a little bit of ramp, and the draws where you have turn 1 Lab Talisman are good enough to where it is worth playing this, even if you're not ramping as hard. But instead of ramp, we have a lot more interaction, right? We have copies of Spell Snare, Force of Negation, Dress Down, Sink into Stupor, still have the 4 Kozilek's Command. So you have a lot more interaction in blue. You get to play a lot more cantrips, and more specifically, quite possibly the best cantrip that exists right now. Side note, let me know in the comments, can we consider Stock Up a cantrip? Or is this like, this is probably more of a divination, but then is divination a cantrip? Let me know in the comments. Either way, Stock Up is just a ridiculous magic card, and more importantly in this deck, not only is it finding you big Eldrazi to cast once you have oodles of mana with Lab and Temple, it can find you the missing half of your combo, and yes, this is a combo deck, Emrakul the Aeon's Torn and Through the Breach. And what I like about using those as your win condition is naturally with Ugin's Lab and Talisman, you have a lot of ways to ramp into 5 mana pretty quickly. So you have this good, proactive, very fast plan. You can turn 3 Breach in some spots if you absolutely have to against the other fast decks. But then you're doing just the typical Eldrazi stuff where you're grinding them out with Null Drifters and Devourers. So I like that it kind of plays the best of both worlds. And I mean, I'm going to co-sign on any deck that has 4 Stock Up. That's all you need to show me. I don't care what the other 56 cards are. Does that mean Doomwake is co-signing on Mono Blue Tron? Well, you never know. Look, it's got 4 Stock Up. I don't care. Mathematic in 18th place. Mono Blue Tron, which is a deck that is oft maligned as this is sort of like the... I'm trying to think of the best phrase here. Like the younger brother of the Green Tron with like all the Ancient Stirrings and Sylvan Scryings and ways to find Tron. This is kind of like the brother that nobody cares about. But I mean, hey, Stock Up is really good. And not only Stock Up, but also a card that was, I believe, in the previous version. I'm going to double check real quick. Yes, 2 copies in the previous version. This one has 4 Portent of Calamity. And if you haven't seen this card before, if you're generating a bunch of mana, it's pretty good. So you reveal X, and then for each card type, you can exile a card of that type. You can cast a spell from among the exiled cards if you hit 4 or more types. So it's a way for you to cast Emrakul for free, not quite free, but a little bit of a discount if you can hit 4 different types. And this deck does have a pretty good spread of type. Artifact, creature, enchantment, instant, planeswalker, sorcery, land, and kindred. So you have basically every single type covered. So not that hard to hit for. Unable to Scream is our removal spell. That's because we're a mono blue deck. We can't really play anything else. A bunch of counters, Remand, Sync, Spell Snare, still have the 4 Kozilek's commands. Subtlety is good interaction. And yeah, some Ugins, 2 of each Ugin, some cantrips, maps to find Tron. I don't know. You know, look, Mono Blue Tron is Mono Blue Tron, but like I said, anything with 4 Stock Up, I can't really say no. And last but not least, from E. Kamanuma in 9th place, just missing out on top 8. This is a big question that people have been asking ever since the Underworld Breach ban. Obviously, we know that Mox Opal, Emery Looker of the Lock, Tamiyo Inquisitive Student, and to a lesser extent, Mox Amber and Mishra's Bauble, that core package of cards is so absurd together. Like, especially the games where you have 2 zeros, one of them being a Mox, a land, an Emery, and a Tamiyo. It's nearly impossible to lose those games when you have those starts. But trying to find the best shell for those cards is very difficult. Now, a lot of them I have been seeing are paired with Cori-steel because you have so many zeros between Bauble, Amber, and Opal that it's very easy to double spell on turn 2 with the cutter. So you have that. And then a lot of people are trying to figure out if you want to play this sort of combo engine. Some people are playing more Jeskai Ascendancies to pair with Emery and a 0. This particular person is only playing 1 Ascendancy to make room for Narsets. I don't know if I love Narset that much because you don't draw the cards until your end step. So yes, you do cast a lot of spells, but you're drawing a lot of cards in your end step, and you don't really have a ton of ways to convert those cards because you only have 7 instants in your deck. So I don't know, maybe a list with Narset needs more interaction, but then it's hard to fit the interaction with all the zeros. Really tough to build this deck, but nonetheless, 100% there will be a deck with Emery Tamio and Mox Opal. It's just people need to find what the best way to support those cards are. So maybe Ekamanuma found it out. With all that said, we are done with Modern. Let's go and dive right into Pioneer. Okay, this doesn't look too bad. So if you compare last week's 24% Mice and 20% Phoenix, both of those numbers have decreased significantly. 16.9 for Mice and 13.8 for Phoenix. So what looked like a 2-deck format last week now is maybe a 3-deck format. Perhaps the mono black mid-range deck. I labeled it as mid-range. I think 95, even more than that, 95% of those lists were playing the demon package. Originally, when people were playing mono black, they weren't playing demons. It was like Gifted Aetherborn, Graveyard Trespasser. Now people have kind of moved away from that, and now they're playing demons. I might try to label that for next week just to give you a better understanding of what the deck looks like. So yeah, that deck has emerged as, I mean, it was 13.8 last week. It jumped up a little bit this week. But as you can see, this chart, half of the format is basically those 3 decks. So we have maybe a bit of a rock, paper, scissors going on here, which is sort of what I said last week. But the percentages have moved in favor of the mono black deck a little bit. Past that, mono white tokens. Look at this, 1.3% last week, 8.8% this week. This is a deck utilizing a decent number. I think the only new card they have is Battlefront, United Battlefront, which is the new collected company. Oh no, they have Elspeth. Yes. So United Battlefront, Elspeth, Caretaker's Talent, Carrot Cake. And then the big upgrades you get to Pioneer is you get to play Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, which is just a completely ridiculous magic card, and better removal like Portable Hole. So perhaps there's something there. Other than that, not really a ton else to say. Jund Sacrifice, small uptick. Celestia Angels, we'll get to that in a second. Small uptick. Azoria Spirits, I guess 5%, non-existent last week, so maybe there's something there. But yeah, this is Pioneer. If you are playing a Pioneer event, you need to have a plan for mono red, Phoenix, and mono black. But let's take a look at some of the spicy deck lists. All right, first up here from Brassator in 30th place. This is Prowess. Now, not necessarily of the Is It variety, which is certainly the more popular version, because I don't know if you guys know this, but Treasure Cruise is pretty good. But this list has no treasure cruises and is just all about getting you dead as quickly as possible. You know, if I told you there was a Prowess deck, a lot of these cards you would expect. Cori-steel Cutter, Monastery Swift Spear, Soulscar Mage, a bunch of 1-mana spells that deal 2 damage, Monstrous Rage, and then a bunch of card draw. Right? This is crazy. 4 Reckless Impulse, 4 Ren's Resolve, and 4 Light Up the Stage. So 12 draw 2s. I will mention those pair very well with Cori-steel Cutter, because cards like that allow you to double spell very effectively. But the one kind of surprise here that I didn't really think about when I was going through the Pioneer card pool is Clever Lumimancer, which, for posterity's sake and for context, when this card came out, I was in love with this card. I thought it was like the next coming of Jesus, the best thing since sliced bread, and it didn't really do that much. But it does give you another 1-drop, so you have 12 good 1-drops and more 1-mana spells for Cutter, and it really pays you off for playing a whole bunch of instants and sorceries. The issue is Magecraft is not Prowess, so this does not get pumped when you play additional copies of Cori-steel Cutter. Keep that in mind. But, you know, this thing can get really, really big and is also absurd with Monstrous Rage. So, I don't know. Interesting take on Prowess. I still don't think I would like it over Is It, just because Treasure Cruise is one of the best cards, if not the best card in the format. So, tough to say, but good nonetheless. Speaking of Prowess, here is what it looks like. Now, this is certainly, there was a couple of different versions of Is It that I saw across the challenges. This is the one that was a little more popular. The big difference here from lists that we may have looked at a couple weeks ago when Tarkir first dropped is they now have adopted Balmor Battle Mage Captain, which is interesting because I kind of forgot that card was legal in Standard. As you can see, this little star in the set symbol, that's Foundations. Usually, if there's a card that somebody plays against you in a Standard event and you question yourself, how is that card legal? The answer is usually Foundations. But nonetheless, you get the full 8-pack of 1-drops and 4 Slickshot Show-Offs, whole bunch of removal, whole bunch of cantrips. The one thing that I will say about this list, I don't know if I can sign off on 2 copies of Treasure Cruise. I'm not exactly sure what I would cut, probably these Spell Pierces, but regardless, I get it, trust me. Drawing the second Treasure Cruise, it's not great. The thing is, even if you draw the first Treasure Cruise, it doesn't really matter if you draw the second one, because the first one is so likely to win you the game that I think I would certainly be okay with drawing 2 copies. So I would play 4 for sure, but the Balmors are an interesting addition to this, especially because it gives your entire team trample, not just the tokens you make off Cutter. So now that I'm going through these lists, maybe this is something we could even consider for the Standard versions. All right, when I was going through and inputting numbers into the spreadsheet, I had no idea what to classify this deck under. I think I ended up putting it under Dimir Demons, but I don't even know if that encompasses all of what's going on here. So Kanara 38204 in 22nd place here. So trying to think of where do I even start with this deck list. Okay, it's a black deck, so it has Fatal Push and Thoughtseize. Moving on? No. Okay, so after Fatal Push, Thoughtseize, you have some removal spells like Shieldred's Edict, Vanishing Verse, Unholy Annex, just a good card. What I like about Unholy Annex is, I don't know if you guys know this, but Rafine Scheming Seer, you see that creature typing right there? Sphinx Demon. So if you curve Rafine into Unholy Annex, you have a demon in play. And let's be honest, Rafine is kind of hard to kill, right? If you use a 2-mana removal spell on it, you have to pay an additional mana for the word 1. If you put a single counter on it, that gets it outside of like cut down range. It still dies to Fatal Push, doesn't die to any of the shocks though, which is nice. So hard for the red deck to kill. And then the other cool card here is Nashi, Searcher in the Dark. Not a demon. It is unfortunately not a rat demon or even a ninja demon. But when it deals combat damage to a player, you basically get to take legendaries or enchantments. So legendaries being Nashi, Rafine, Valky, enchantments being Unholy Annex. So that's kind of cool. You have this Valky plus Jace Reawaken plan where you can plot the Valky and cast it later. So just your typical Esper demons. Oh, wait, there's a Jeskai card in here as well. I didn't really understand the Shikos at first, and talking about the deck now, I still don't really understand them. I guess they're just good to flashback Fatal Push, Thoughtseize, maybe a Jace. I actually don't know how this works with Valky. Okay, I think it works the way that I think it does, but I'm not positive. Let me know in the comments. And then most importantly in the comment section, what do we call this deck? We need to come up with a name for it. It to be like Demon Dragons. There's probably something there. Anyways, sweet looking list and definitely qualifies as spice. Ladies and gentlemen, watching this video on YouTube, I implore you, just take a quick look at this deck list. Do you notice anything strange? I'll give it a second. So at face value, this looks like your pretty run-of-the-mill Angels deck. You got Bishop of Wings, the Elves, Giadas, Resplendent Angels, Righteous Valkyrie, Skyclave Apparition. You got your 4 copies of Collected Company, because Collected Company, really good at finding a bunch of creatures, specifically Angels, 23 lands, and some Kayla's Reconstructions. Now I'm going to go ahead and read you the text on United Battlefront. It says, look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to 2... Wait, what does that say? Does that say non-creature? Non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest in the bottom in a random order. I'm not trying to shame. Basically, I can't figure out if this is a bit where they knew that they couldn't hit anything off of Battlefront, or if this was them legitimately just not fully reading the card. Either way, I think it's great. I can envision somebody who was maybe playing Pioneer 6 or 7 months ago, back when it was relevant, and then coming back into the format with their hardcore Angels player, going through the spoiler and trying to figure out, like, why have people not tried United Battlefront and Angels yet? So, yeah, just play some more Kayla's reconstructions. Anyways, thought that would be a fun way to end Pioneer. Now, the last course, the most important course, Standard. We had a lot of RCs to go over. Let's take a look at the metagame. Look, I said this last week. I was a firm believer, and this wasn't even that hot of a take. Everybody knew going into the weekend that Prowess was going to be the most played deck at every RC. It's what I played in the RC. It's what 33% of the room. To give you an idea, both Japan and American RCs were 33% of the metagame Prowess. And then when you factor in some of the other RCs and the challenges, that gets us to 28% of the weekend. It's the best deck in the format. Don't kid yourself into thinking it's not. If you don't want to play Prowess, you need to have a very, very, very good reason not to, and a very, very good plan against it, which I don't think a lot of people did. There were some people in the top 8 of Minneapolis that did, but a lot of other people maybe tricked themselves into thinking something that was not true. Jeskai Oculus 11.2, Mono Red for down. Mono Red was 17 last week, and it's down to 6.7, which is kind of ridiculous. Demir Midrange, roughly about the same. Esper Pixie, essentially non-existent this weekend. Jeskai Control, which did win Minneapolis, 5.8%. Slight uptick in Domain, which is something I kind of expected because Domain is one of the few decks that I think has a reasonable matchup against Prowess. Omniscience 6.7. That surprised me. I was very, very surprised to see 3 copies of Omniscience in the top 8 of Minneapolis. That was a matchup that, at least in my experience, felt pretty good for Prowess. So, little surprised to see that. Maybe they had a plan that I wasn't thinking of. Mono Black Demons, another huge uptick here, 5.8%, essentially non-existent last week. So, a lot of people wanted to register on Holy Annex. Again, that's one of those decks that I think people think they have a good plan against Prowess, but your Mono Black deck can't remove a Cori-steel cutter. So, I don't know if I can sign off on that one. But in any case, this is the metagame. We're not going to take a look at any of the Prowess or Oculus or Mono Red. We got some spice, but it's spice from the RCs that actually did relatively well. First up here from the Southeast Asia Regional Championships, which was 13th place from Ruben Natarajan. And this is Boros tokens. And I mean, clean list. I gotta say, Ruben, really clean list, all 4 ofs. I don't know how much I like playing 20 lands and 16 3-drops. That scares me a little bit. Like, we can probably cut the 4th Tursa. That can probably go for at least a 21st land, maybe even the 4th Goblin Surprise for a 22nd. But I do like this pairing of Stadium Headliner, Voice of Victory, Frontline Rush, Boros Charm. Those cards pair well together. The Swift Spears are a little weird, but I do think you need additional 1-drops. And if you're playing Rush, Charm, and Torch the Tower, the Swift Spears sort of make sense. And then I think I like playing both 4 Screaming Nemesis and 4 War Leader's Call. Call is one of your best cards against Jeskai and Omniscience, and Nemesis is one of your best cards against Prowess. So I like playing 4 of each of those. I like the 1s and 2s. Just, I feel like we need a couple more lands. And also, what is this doing here? But unless I'm missing something, and feel free to let me know in the comments, I cannot find a single way to make a treasure or in any other shape or form cast a black card in this deck. So we're just playing with a 14 card sideboard. Probably should just play a second Urbrask's Forge. I don't know. Again, not sure if this was a bit, if they like lost a bet and had to put a Mardu card in their sideboard they weren't allowed to cast. Not entirely sure. But in any case, I think this is a good approach to the whole Frontline Rush Voice of Victory deck, and one that I might want to spend some time on. Now, you want to talk about banger deck lists. Marco Aurelio Lima. This was from Brazil, the Brazilian RC, in 11th place. And spoiler alert, I recorded a video with this deck yesterday on stream, and you guys are going to like this one. So this is Smuggler's Surprise, but there's only 2 copies of Smuggler's Surprise. And I kind of like that because at the end of the day, if you want to cast Surprise for the full amount or the full value, it's kind of like an 8-mana card. So playing 4 copies of an 8-mana card is something you would really never do. especially when you already have 2 other 8 mana cards in your deck. So I kind of like trimming on surprise. And one thing when I was looking at this deck list initially that confused me a little bit was Nature's Rhythm. And I feel like this is a card that people have not explored enough in mid-range decks. And I think this is what this is, where for 3 mana, it's a ramp spell. You can just go get an elf. For 4 mana, it's also a ramp spell. Once you start getting to 5, you actually have some pretty good utility. You can get Muera Trash Tactician, which is not only a ramp spell, but also some amount of card advantage once you're spending that much mana on spells with the expend. On 4, you can get a Raptor. The other really important thing to get on 3 is Censor, where if you go ramp spell, then turn 3, you can go Rhythm for 3 against Prowess, go get the Censor, and unless they have a bounce spell immediately, it's going to be really hard for them to play through this. So I like that aspect. You have the 5s, which double as 3s with Overlord and Bloomvine. You have Roxanne as a tutor target for Nature's Rhythm. And then at the top end, a nice little even split of 2 Carnosaur, 2 Volborn, and 2 Ureni. So when I first saw this deck list, I saw the Phyrexian Censor, I saw the Nature's Rhythms, and I was like, this looks like an absolute pile. And then I played some games with it, and it's a lot better than it looks. I've tried a lot of different versions of Smuggler's Surprise. This is the cleanest version that I've played so far. And I love the Nature's Rhythms. I think they were perfect. And then one other card I want to shout out here is Bramble Familiar. This is a 2 mana ramp spell, which is sometimes all you need. It's a 7 mana payoff where, if it's basically a split card of if you need mana, you have mana. If you need payoff, you have payoff. But also, it's a raccoon, which, funny enough, makes this card even better. Where if you go turn 2 Familiar, turn 3 Trash Tactician, you then make 2 mana off of the Trash Tactician, and that jumps you basically to turn 4, you have 7 mana off of just these 2 alone. So, really cool looking deck list. I do think I would play a Craterhoof somewhere in here, maybe over the second Ureni, and then shave on like the Elder and maybe the Calamity in the board, but clean looking list. I know it looks strange, but it plays out a lot better than it looks, trust me. Next up from the Japanese RC, this is Shintaro Ishimura, who I believe got 11th place. There was actually 2 Gruul Delirium decks in the top 16 of the Japan RC. It might have been top 32. So interesting to see 2 different Delirium decks do well. This one, really clean list. So you have the Delirium package of Patchwork Beastie, Fear of Missing Out, and Wildfire Wickerfolk, which I'll pay you off for Delirium. Both Fear and Beastie are Delirium enablers, so put cards into the graveyard. 4 Keen-Eyed Curator, never been a better time to play this card. It is a 3/3, so it doesn't die to Burst Lightning against Prowess. It is still a good Delirium payoff, where if you have 4 types, you can make it a 7/7 trample, and its main deck graveyard hate against Omniscience. Fantastic card. It also is good against Shiko. They tap out for a Shiko, you can exile their thing. Really good card right now. Breakout to find your pieces, and then a nice split of pump spells. 2 Overprotect, 1 Monstrous Rage, and 3 Violent Urge. I like this because you want to draw 1 Urge a game, but the second one's kind of bad. And then splitting Overprotect and Monstrous Rage gives you a little bit more coverage against a wider range of removal spells. So I like that as well. The 1 Pyroclasm main deck is beautiful with the second one on the board. There's spots where it's really good against Prowess. Makes a lot of sense. And then 4 Tursas. Again, I think I like cutting all the other 3s. As much of a fan as I am of the 2/4 Omnivorous Flytrap, it's just not the right time for it. So Tursa has haste, fuels Delirium, just perfect card. So really clean looking deck list here. And definitely would spend some time on this one and maybe is worth working on for sure. And then last but not least, another absolute banger from the Japanese RC. This one is from Motoaki Ito in 18th place. And this is something that I had spent a little bit of time on, but not too much. So it's Dimir Oculus. So first of all, you start with Oculus. You have ways to self-mill and discard Philagi Archaeologist, Overlord of the Baelmerk, Roiling Dragonstorm. These are all ways to put Oculus in the graveyard. Your reanimation spell is No One Left Behind. You get to play much better interaction, specifically 4 copies of Duress, because Duress not only protects the turn you're going for Oculus, proactively it also takes their cutters. So I like that. And then not only that, but you get to play better individual threats than, I mean, I don't know. You could argue maybe Terse is a better individual threat than Preacher. It's close, but Preacher and Shieldred, fantastic cards. And then the last thing I want to highlight here is this Dragon package. It's a small package, 2 Region and 2 Scavenger, 1 Meringue with the 3 Dragon Storms. But again, these also not only give you additional angles of attack with the bodies themselves, but also draw 3, discard 1, good when you're trying to Oculus, and both of these cards pick up the Dragon Storm. So again, really, really cool looking deck list here. Does a lot of what I think the blue-black decks should be doing, but refines those numbers down a little bit. So really clean looking deck list. Thank you all so much for watching. This week was an absolute banger. I had a great time. I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at all these deck lists. And I gotta say, obviously, Standard right now is really cutter heavy, but there was some real bangers from these RCs. And I'm going to keep looking, digging deep, and trying to find some more sweet deck lists to bring over the next week or two. So in any case, thank you guys for watching. Subscribe to the video if you're new. Let me know in the comments. Like the video as well. And until next time, adios.